Hey, hi everyone, whoever is joining. Let's wait for a couple of minutes. In the meantime, I'm gonna try to somehow turn on ability to chat if I manage to do that. Here we go. Perfect. So, and here we go. Okay. So hopefully, I think I've enabled the chat capability, and there's also a live Q&A tab. So if at any point in time you guys have any questions, you can either shoot them here in chat or send them into the Q&A session. And then once we are done, I will try to answer as much as possible. So let's wait for another minute and then we can get started. Hopefully you all can see my screen, which I think you can. Um, I'm going to go into the full present mode. So if there are any questions, I'm unlikely to see them. But then again, happy to answer any questions at the end of the session. Hope everyone is doing well. People are joining from very multiple different places, so I'm not sure how early or how late it is for you. Okay. Um, full- Going into the full screen mode. Awesome. Hopefully that works. Well, welcome everyone. Exciting topic for today. We're going to talk about the 30-day sprint to fundraise, specifically very much deeply focused on fundraising for AI companies. I think the lessons probably are valid for anybody building in tech, but really what we've done in this particular instance is we've looked at 60 successful funding rounds from 2025. We looked at even more unsuccessful rounds, and hopefully it's going to bring you some really interesting insight. Okay, just a second, because my team is telling me that the way the screen is displayed is super weird. So I'm gonna try to fix that first. And I don't know what's happening here. Why is it like that? So let me try to reshare again. Yeah, thanks guys. Thanks for for letting me know. We're gonna try this again, and then if it doesn't work, I'm just gonna have to present without the full screen mode. Because something is okay. Let's just do this without the full screen mode, but hopefully at least you can see the content. So hopefully that works. Okay, quickly on who I am. I've spent last 11 years in the VC space. So well, actually now it's 800 rounds, helped companies raise over 3 billion, 640 million last year. Most of it went into the AI companies. I've also been a chief operations officer of an AI company. We got to Series B. So scaled from pre-seed all the way up to exit to a private equity exactly a year ago, and now actually building something new and fundraising too, and speaking to a lot of investors, both for companies we work with and mentor, as well as company I'm trying to get up the ground myself. So have a lot of lessons that hopefully going to be helpful. Quick note, this is actually our sixth webinar. We've done a webinar around rules of fundraising. We've done a webinar around financial modeling and Series A. We've done one specifically on pitch decks. We've done one around how to find warm intros if you don't know where to find them or if you don't have a network, and also one around how most funds take decisions. So how to pass an investment committee for with a VC. So if you are interested or if you need access, feel free to send me a quick note, and happy to share those with you as well. Agenda for today, we're going to basically talk about what's up with AI fundraising, what's happening, how to pitch AI companies to VCs, and going to dive deeper on the moat, on the GTM, on the numbers expected, and then happy to take any questions. So, the baseline, I think AI used to be the cheat code. It's not anymore. So 2 years ago, if you would say you're a company that's built on Gen AI, it was super easy to raise millions of funding. And that has changed in 2025, and it's going to be changing even more going into 2026. Let's start with good news first. AI sells. Everyone wants AI. If you're an investor, probably on the software side, a solid 90% of people I'm talking to just want to see AI. And if it's not there, then they're not interested. So if you are building an AI startup, you probably picked the right vertical in a way. We also have a lot of investors saying that if you're not building an AI, this is probably the last funding round you will get. And that was back in 2025. So nobody is really interested to look at technology or software solutions that are not AI. So again, that's kind of a positive. Another positive is that AI deals tend to be higher, so you can raise more money. And generally, they also have higher valuations, which is great. So in pre-seed, your typical raise around 500,000 to 700K tends to be higher in US than in Europe, on an average of around 3.6 million valuation, according to data. In seed, typical raise around 3 to 4 million, again, tends to be higher in US versus Europe, was pre-money valuation of 16 to 18 million. And there is a very clear AI premium that you can see at that stage, because the valuations and the rounds are both higher. And it's kind of the same at Series A, where the normal round is around 12 to 20 million, significantly actually higher than non-AI companies right now, and kind of continues through the company's life cycle. Now, I think what you're hearing in news a lot, hopefully, maybe you've heard this, is that 50% of all VC funding went to AI, which is incredible. It's great. It has grown 75 or 85% year on year. And that's all true. But if you actually look at the data on a granular level, the picture becomes a little bit more difficult because 41% of all of that funding went into the top five companies. So that's your OpenAI, that's your Anthropic, etc. Practically 80% went into US. And to be even more granular, actually, 60% went specifically to the Bay Area. And what that means is if you're in a very early stage and if you are not based out of US or out of Bay Area, the funding actually is pretty scarce. People are looking to invest, but the bar for investment is pretty high. Like we're going to cover exactly what it is and what people are looking for, but it's definitely not as impressive of a gold rush that you'd expect while you're reading about all of these companies fundraising. And this picture actually shows why. So if you see the data from Carta, and by the way, I very highly encourage you to generally go to Carta, and they have this data, I think, of fundraising or state of startups 2025. They have like 100 pages of really, really interesting data, everything around valuations and round sizes and more and more and more. But what you can clearly see here is that the largest surge in terms of the number of deals was in 2021. That was that biggest height of the bubble after which the market kind of crashed. And if you look at this data, it never really recovered. So yes, well, there are more money being poured in technology, in AI specifically. The number of deals kind of stays at the same level. It just means that, again, the larger rounds of the largest AI companies are skewing the data. But in reality, getting the actual deal signed is just as difficult as it was a year ago, 2 years ago, or 3 years ago. And that means 99% of companies still don't get funded. There is this massive flight to quality right now where investors concentrate capital into fewer, strong and seed startups or Series A startups, and that drives up round cycles and deal cycles and valuations. But that means a lot of the companies that are somehow outside of that threshold are being forced to bootstrap or find alternative funding sources. So the jinx of it is in 2025, AI would get you term sheets immediately. In 2024, in 2025, it started getting a little bit more difficult, but still, if you would say AI first, AI OS, AI infra, you would land meetings. And in 2026, AI is the baseline. If you're not AI, you're not going to get funding at all. It's assumed that every technology startup is an AI startup in one or other way. And if that's the reality, the question becomes, how do you maximize your chances of success and how do you make sure that you are able to raise? Number one core mistake that everyone agrees on, this is pretty universal, is companies working on fundraising instead of working on fundability. And you might ask, what does it mean? Founders who are working on fundraising have an idea, maybe have a pitch deck, maybe have an early pilot, and then they spend months chasing warm intros. We've heard it like pretty much on a daily basis. We have amazing product. We just need warm intros. Can you please, introduce us to someone? Can you please let us know which investor might be interested in taking a meeting? That doesn't really work. I'm happy to address why, but I think a bottom line is if you have a great product, if you have early traction, I see that even cold outbound emails are generating enormous amount of meetings. So the question becomes not, do you have warm intros, which is always helpful, but have you created an exciting enough fundable story so that people would actually reply to you? And again, if you're working on fundraising, you'd normally probably, be looking at all of these different funds. You try to optimize and contact as many as possible. A lot of founders are just sending blast emails, and you spend a lot of time trying to get your DD room right. So is my financial forecast really good? Is my pitch deck really good, etc.? All of that is kind of still needed, but without this second element on the right, without the actual fundability, probably going to yield 2 investor meetings, maybe 5, maybe 10, and high likelihood that you're not actually going to close a funding round. So what does it mean to work on fundability? It means that you're working on testing and validating the product. You're trying to get that product to market. You're trying to get it into actual customer hands. You have de-risked for VC as much as possible. So you can clearly explain why the tech is already ready, why the platform is ready, why the team is amazing, who are the first customers. You are selling and building traction around the clock, and you're creating proof points for each risk. So providing evidence that this will actually work. And then once all of that is done, you're looking at the ICP funds and you're starting them really deep, like who's the best fit, finding the relevant person and trying to reach out to them in a very personalized way. And that kind of fundamentality element, that's what actually works. And essentially, in a nutshell, if you build a business that has great traction or interesting traction, or at least fully de-risks the business for the investors, tells them that customers are going to buy it, users will want it, you'll probably get investors pretty easily. If instead you're focusing on just chasing investors, the fundraise is probably going to be tough, or it might take quite a lot of time. 90%, I'd probably say 99% of fast AI rounds are fast because the demand is undeniable. If I've looked at like 60 pitch decks from the companies that raised last year, and I think one big thing they have in common, traction is slide number 2 in their deck, way ahead of your additional problem, solution, or anything else. They instantly go into traction, right? This is 4 million seed, slide number 1. Okay, here is slide number 3. This is how we grow. 7.4 million seed of eloquent AI. Slide number 1 is what they do, and slide number 2 is their traction. 6 million seed from Lyra. Slide number 1 is what they do, and slide number 2 is their traction. That's what sells. This is what gets investors. This is what gets people, even if you don't have warm intros. If you're able to bring your product to the level where it's generating, if you've truly found that early product market fit and the users love it, and we can discuss all the different stages of that product market fit and how you do it in B2B space versus B2C space. But fundamentally, if the product is so good that the market really wants it, and you're able to make that compelling case, investors are going to be recommending themselves. And I see this in multiple deals where you contact a couple of investors. These investors really like your metrics or your team or what you're building. They actually contact other investors they have worked with prior to offer them collaborating on the round. Suddenly you start getting inbounds. Suddenly more people are interested, and it becomes almost kind of like a snowball going down the mountain where you got all the warm interest you ever wanted because you have that traction. I'd probably say even if you post that on LinkedIn, you're going to get loads and loads of investor interest. Again, opposite to trying to build a product and pitch it then. It's possible. It can raise money, especially pre-seed, but it's just going to be more difficult. Why this matters now more than ever? Too many AI companies have already crashed and burned. So a lot of investors I'm speaking to, they need to manage risk. They don't necessarily fundamentally always going to understand what you're building and how you're building, especially in early stages. They're not diving that deep. So the only thing they want to know is there sufficient evidence that customers want this product and customers are going to buy this product? And if you can give them this evidence, the fundraise goes well. And if you can't, then again, it's difficult. We also see a lot of AI washing with startups that actually are not doing real AI. So you'd see that pretty much every pitch deck is we have AI powered platform, we have AI native platform. But once you start looking into that, is it truly AI? What kind of AI? Are you using NLP? Are you building something on top of Gen AI? Using reinforcement learning? Like, what have you actually built? Or is it more or less a ChatGPT wrapper on top of your LLMs? The other risk is that we see a lot of AI tourists. And AI tourists is this new term for loads of customers that are trying AI tools because they're handy, but then they don't end up using them. Statistically, the churn rate for like wrapper startups is 2x higher than your SaaS average. And what that means is that quite commonly the tool is launched, you can see a lot of downloads, but actually customers don't stick. And investors refer to this as your leaky bucket. So no one wants to give you money if you have, instead of a business, a leaky bucket, sorry, that's going to be bleeding those money. And there is also a very wide consensus. This is the first time, and probably the first months, that I hear over 50% of investors talking about AI bubble coming. Past year, a lot of people were divided. Will it actually happen? This year, people are saying, yes, it's going to happen. There's going to be an AI bubble. It's already there. The valuations are way too inflated. There are way too many companies. There are way too many investors that have poured money in the startups. No one knows how it's going to happen, how much of the market is going to be affected, who's going to be wiped out. But one thing people know, one thing investors know, is that they don't want to be participating in that AI bubble. And that means in your storytelling with investors, the risking becomes really massive. How you communicate your story, how you explain why this startup is going to be critical becomes very important. So what wins you investor money technically is absolutely the same what wins you customers and revenue. You just need to prove you're building something useful. Solving a large pain, which also means a big TAM and potential for fast growth, and having a very clear solution with very clear outcomes and value proposition, especially supported by customer love. And then, of course, investors want to see your classic team, ability to execute, and a moat, ideally on tech or GTM side, or both. We're going to cover that soon. So a quick AI VC test, based on everything that I'm hearing, is, do you create measurable value fast? If yes, great. Can you acquire customers relatively predictably? Or have you figured out at least one channel? Do you have something interesting around your distribution? Do you get stronger with scale? And will your unit economics improve with volume, which is super important for AI companies? So the gold rules of pitching AI to investors is essentially pain first, math second, and tech third. And what I mean by this is the most important thing is in your first slide, explain very clearly what you're doing. No AI powered infrastructure for decision making. You can do it. It sounds fancy, but it would be much better if it's really specific and you explain what are you doing. Masked second, which I mean immediately after that, follow up with numbers, any traction, any validation. If you're seeing that kind of uptick curve, that works. And then tech third. Tech in this equation, surprisingly, maybe or not, is the least important thing because there are very few investors who believe that there is any moat or defensibility in the technology that you're building because it's so easy and cheap and fast to build right now, because it's so easy to copy. You've, I'm not sure if you've seen this, but at one point there were two students that have copied the entire Lovable over 2 days. Why didn't that company become Lovable? Because it's not just about technology. Technology can be replicated. It's your execution. It's how you're thinking about distribution. It's how you're communicating your value. It's the strategy that you employ in terms of go-to-market, in terms of pricing, and so much more. That's from Hustle Fund. They're basically saying the same. Almost every pitch deck we see sounds like we're building something powered by AI. So what you need to remember is AI needs to be differentiating. It needs to be grounded in clear outcomes. There needs to be proof, ideally grounded in customer quotes, numbers, ROI. There's still a lot of demand for vertical AI SaaS, and there is a lot of focus on talent and moat. Our docs and stats show that an investor looks at successful deck for 2.5 minutes and successful decks around 30 seconds. So that means your message needs to be clear. So going back to that first slide, that immediate one-liner. Last year, again, if you would do something like AI-powered decision-making infrastructure, you would get a lot of people interested. This year, practically everyone is using those things. Everyone is using AI-powered things for something. So really what grabs most attention and what converts more investor interest is if you clearly explain the use case. So instead of saying AI-powered legal assistance, you can say law firms use Harvey to draft contracts 10x faster without junior associate review bottlenecks. Instead of saying revolutionary medical documentation AI, you can say rehab clinics use Ficus to generate patient reports in real time without doctors typing a single word. Instead of saying next gen code completion tool, that's not tool, sorry. You can say engineering teams use Cursor to ship features 2x faster without context switching between docs and IDE. And what that means is that you can forego the whole AI talk even entirely because people now know that AI is a baseline and you're probably doing something with AI, and instead really focus on your outcomes and on your value proposition. You can always try to combine those two if you feel unsettled by letting the AI word go. So, but I'd say don't use still AI powered. Maybe then better to use AI native, maybe better to put AI in some other way, but try to build it to specific outcomes because revolutionary itself is very vague. And again, sounds a little bit like AI washing. So words that gonna kill your pitch today, AI platform. I mean, if you can't come up with anything else, it's gonna work, but people are just gonna be rolling their eyes because they don't understand what it means. Transformative, AI powered, game changer, revolutionary, groundbreaking. Mega Agarwal from DeFi said it in the best way. The more a founder says AI in the pitch, the less AI the company uses. So the people doing innovative things, it's built in, but it's not the core of their pitch. So do I mean that you have to go and cross out all of these words from your pitch deck? Absolutely not. Of course, there needs to be a slide around tech, maybe around features where you explain what kind of AI you're using, and you can say AI platform. You can even, if you want to say AI powered, but it can't be the core of your pitch. The core of your pitch needs to be around how you have solved the problem or the pain of the customer 10x better than any other companies available in the market today. How can you prove that? and how can you scale it from there? Another example of what you can say instead. So instead of saying we're AI-powered platform, we reduce customer responses by 50% using automated classification. Instead of saying revolutionary technology, just say we process eight claims 8x faster. Instead of saying disruptive AI solution, you can say enterprise customers save 2 million per year. Instead of saying groundbreaking ML models, you can say our system achieves X% accuracy on X task, up from industry standard Y. So try to make it as concrete as possible. Another thing, I kind of touched already upon the example, so I'm not going to go through this again, but generic team experience doesn't necessarily work. You need to try to highlight AI team capabilities if you're building an AI product, or be honest if you don't have them and lean into something else like your domain expertise. 95% of founders I speak to have zero understanding of their gross margins and scalability. And they don't understand how those gross margins are going to change when they scale, especially in pre-seed or seed. When you're building a financial model, I'm still seeing that most of the founders are putting down 95% gross margins, kind of like your best in class SaaS gross margins. That means you're not an AI startup typically. So what investors read is this is not an AI startup because AI startup margins are quite different, and we're going to get to that. So you need to know your numbers. You need to know how your gross margins change as you scale. You need to understand your scaling logic. And there is also a very big kind of evolution towards making sure you have a demo in your pitch deck, which I highly recommend. A lot of people can't grasp fast enough on what your platform is doing or can't understand it. So it's very helpful to have at least a short video around how the product works, but even better is to show how the early customers are using that product. So what kills AI deals today? Platform dependency. You get this question a lot from VCs. What happens if OpenAI or Anthropic can shut off your access? Are you not going to be investable? The best startups are building in the way where they can switch from multiple different models or select various different LLMs depending on their use case. False product market fit signals. Pilots don't equal production. Now, if you don't have production, you only have pilots. Pilots are better than nothing. But really, you can only say you've got into product market fit when the market is adopting, that adoption is growing, and you also use strong retention. So that's something you want to get to. Lack of problem obsession. Quite a few technical founders that we work with over the past couple of months lost deals, and direct VC feedback was it just doesn't seem like there is a customer understanding. And what that means is you've spent half a year building your product and you haven't showed it to the customer yet. And you're coming to a VC and you're asking VC to give you money, but the customers haven't seen the product yet. That's kind of what VCs would take as lack of product obsession in a way. And that's often very true for technical founders. Try to get that product not necessarily even into customer hands, but ask them for their feedback. Make sure that you understand that customer's pain really, really deeply. Make sure that you understand the value proposition. And ideally, in the best and fastest deals, that ROI is already quantified. You know what you're doing today versus what the market is doing or what the other competitors are doing, and you know what you're doing better. Lack of moat, that's particularly for ChatGPT wrappers. A lot of those, they used to get financing. They really don't anymore. So if you have a solution that's more of a wrapper, you need to think about what defensibility is going to be. And similarly, it applies to distribution mode. So because again, tech is so easy to copy, a lot of the investors, practically everyone is looking for a distribution mode. What kind of interesting insight do you have about the market? What kind of interesting insight do you have about how you're going to sell this? Is it just going to be your founder-led sales? Have you figured out a partner channel? Have you figured out some virality crack? Do you have some contracts others would be difficult to access? Think about the distribution mode because it's going to be important. Crowded categories. A lot of those, I can talk about them. I think probably like restaurant tech, for example, we see people who absolutely don't want to finance anything there, even if it's AI. Any technology for gyms, for example, nobody wants to operate in that market because the churn is inherently high. So any categories that are already AI SDRs, AI SDR is probably the toughest thing you can try to sell now because there are so many AI SDRs that investors, even for businesses that look good, just don't want to put the money in. And then your COGS risk. So is there a risk that your inference cost is going to explode with usage? How are you going to approach that risk, and have you thought it out? So what about that moats? What kind of moats investors are looking for? I think it's not about the model, right? A lot of the VCs are looking for companies that are deeply embedded in enterprise workflows. The moat in this case becomes that deep embeddedness, right? So you're already integrated. It's very difficult for enterprises to switch you. The moat also can be proprietary data, especially if you're building vertical AI solution. Let's say you're building it in healthcare or you're building it in mortgages. If whatever you have built has a unique data set that makes the result of your model of what you're building better than the rest of the market, then that's considered moat. And then generally, the question that a lot of people are asking, if OpenAI launches a 10x better model tomorrow, will you still exist? And that's something that you need to think through before taking investor meetings. What actually wins AI deals in 2026? Real revenue traction. You can't beat that one. So any revenue counts, but generally at least 1 million for seed, at least 3 million for Series A, although there are a lot of companies now that have 10 to 30 million in revenue at Series A. And on top of that revenue traction, you also need to show retention, which is very, very important. So if you can show in a tangible way that users love your product and they're engaging with your product, then lending the deal is going to be much more um, intuitive and easier. Vertical expertise, deep domain knowledge, I actually see wins over broad AI capabilities. And this is very interesting. It was very different 1 to 2 years ago. So 2 years ago, if you were an AI expert, you could lend term sheets. Everybody loved AI talent. AI talent was super scarce. Now the landscape is evolving fast enough that a lot of people who didn't necessarily had very dedicated AI capabilities can still build an AI solution. So broad AI capabilities become less important and domain expertise really wins. That goes back to that deeply understanding customer workflows, deeply understanding customer pain. If you're able to make a case for how well you know your future customer, how well you know those use cases, then that's something that definitely helps to land the deal. Data flywheel, if you're able to prove that every customer makes the product better, but again, those proprietary data sets. And I've actually seen and worked with companies that at seed stage raised 8 million in capital to acquire a service company that would have a data. So in this case, an AI SDR company acquiring an outbound service firm purely for the data purposes, because data is very expensive and data is very valuable. So if in one or other way you can explain why you have more valuable data than the rest of the market, investors are going to love that. And capital efficiency. If you're a later stage company, your burn multiple should be good. High revenue per employee used to be the case that the larger team you had at Series A, it was almost an advantage. I've actually seen a deal being passed, I think 2 years ago, and the feedback from VC was the team is too small. At Series A, we want to see at least 20 employees. That has changed. So now the more capital efficient the team is, the leaner it is, the easier it is to lend a deal. A couple of AI modes that VCs actually found. So we've spoken about proprietary data. Evals as mode. So again, those hard-won insights about like customer business logic. If you're obsessed about the problem, and if you're building with design partners, for example, companies that eventually are going to sell the solution to, and you understand those workflows and pain better than anyone else, that becomes a massive moat. Anything related to context, reasoning, memory, there are a lot of AI companies that by themselves are selling this as a layer on top of your LLMs. But if you can show that your solution is deeply embedded into people's workflows. If you can show that your solution actually retains memory or context, that becomes very, very sticky. And corner resources, again, that's more about the distribution modes. Train models that rivals can't use, special partnerships, contracts, companies that are going to take you to market, exclusive data access. All of that is very valuable in the AI space. Quick mode test. If OpenAI ships this feature next quarter, do you die? That's a main one. We've actually seen a lot of businesses being killed by that. And then one of the core things investors are asking themselves when they evaluate AI business. So if your answer to that first question is yes, you have to rethink what you're building. If a competitor clones UI and prompt, what's going to break or how are you going to survive? What gets better only because you have customers that kind of, again, is back to your flywheel and the product getting better with more customers. And then what makes margins improve at scale? How are you going to get from your typical AI gross margins towards higher margins? Traction expectations by stage. So pre-seed, pre-revenue generally is okay, but I also have to say that a lot of the pre-seed companies I see have some level of revenue, at least 100K ARR, very often 400K ARR. At seed, you normally need to have demonstrated customer validation and early ARR traction. A lot of companies have at least a million. Some companies have zero, that still happens, but that only happens primarily when the team is very exciting, second time founders or really deep domain experts, etc. At Series A, 2 to 4 million ARR is a baseline. Top performers have 30 million ARR. At Series B, 10 million plus ARR expected. In SaaS, there used to be a rule, which I'm not sure if you've heard about, but it was you were expected to grow your revenue 3x, 3x, then 2x, 2x, 2x. So essentially, VCs would like your business if you've tripled, tripled, quadrupled, quadrupled, sorry, tripled, tripled, and then double, double, doubled. And now that has changed where the expectation is that you need to at least quadruple your revenue in year one, then quadruple your revenue in year two, and then triple, triple, triple from there. VCs are a little bit split here. There are those VCs who are very laser focused on your first year. So they want you to get from zero to at least a million of revenue in a first year. And if they're not there, they don't want to finance you. And then from that kind of 1 million grow fast. There are those who are very forgiving around how long it takes you to get to the first million. But one truth is absolutely universal. Once you got to that first 1 million, it's almost like the clock starts. So from there, you need to grow fast. And if you're not growing fast, securing the next round is going to be very, very difficult. This is AI benchmarks right now. I think they're from Bessemer Capital. But you know what used to be your kind of unicorns? Unicorns are dead. No one cares about $1 billion outcomes anymore. People care about decatrons, and then there's something else. But the math of it looks like this. There are companies that are essentially supernovas. Supernovas is your Cursor, is your Lovable, is the companies that get to 100 million ARR in 2 years. This used to be 5 years to 7 years for the fastest growing SaaS companies, and now it's actually 2 years. They often do that at the expense of gross margin. So the gross margins are 25% or can even be negative because they're so much reliant on heavy LLM usage. But you'd normally see at least a million of ARR per FTE. And then you have your shooting stars. Shooting stars are kind of like your upgraded SaaS companies of the past. So these companies are expected to get to 100 million ARR within 4 years. And the trajectory would go like 3 million in year one, quadruple to 12 million, kind of quadruple to 40 million, and then, triple or double from there. They normally have better profitability metrics. So the gross margins here are around 60%, and the ARR per FTE can be smaller. Now, it's extremely difficult to get finance today if you're neither in the first bucket and neither in the second bucket. Not to say that it's not possible. You can get financing, just to say that probably not from VCs or from a very narrow set of VCs. So if you've heard about power law, you know that the VC funds are built in a way when they expect one company to be able to return the entire fund. And that means that a lot of VCs today are looking for 1 billion, most of them 10 billion, and some of them even $100 billion outcomes on the exit. Now, what that means is that getting to that outcome requires a lot of very fast growth. And that growth needs to at least follow into the shooting stars category. It can be a little bit less, maybe in Europe, in MENA as well, that's still kind of acceptable. But generally, you need to understand that for a VC to be interested in your business, it needs to have this amazing growth potential. If you feel like you're not there, ask me a question. I can tell you how, who else can be financed. There are some VCs that are called seed strapping VCs. There are more and more of them. They're kind of financing much slower growth companies as long as you're profitable. There are also different kind of growth funds. There are family offices. So there is funding out there, just not necessarily VC funding. So the gross margin problem. Traditional SaaS used to have 75 to 85% margins. A lot of businesses even 90% plus. AI startups on average have 50 to 60%. OpenAI actually has pretty good margins, I think 70% or so. Anthropic had around 60. Your typical AI startup is around that 50, 60 mark. And then there are those companies that are growing really fast, like Cursor, and that's just minus 30, like negative gross margin, which is crazy. It's okay to have average margins at start. You don't have to be worried if your margins are not in the 80, 90%. But at Series A, Series B, businesses with 55% margins might trigger difficult conversation. So you need to have a pathway around how those margins are going to improve. Some of the financial red flags VCs would watch out for. One is high valuations without demonstrated ROIs. Second one is what we call pilot purgatory, when enterprises are testing but not buying. And that probably means that there either is revenue without real ROI, and that means they're going to churn, or there is not even a revenue because they're just pilots. CAC rising without the LTV increase, seen it for a lot of companies. API dependency without no margin path. So again, that gross margins kind of need to start improving as you're growing. And zombie metrics. That's probably the main one. Under zombie metrics, we count, again, logos without revenue or user count. So a lot of AI companies are trying to raise money now, and they're showing this amazing user downloads curve. It goes like this, like, and they're like, yes, we found product market fit, or we have early proof because people are downloading, but retention is not there or usage is not there. That's called zombie metrics. You typically need to work on those before you're able to raise capital. And companies that are unable to work on those actually turn in what we call zombie companies, which is they can't really do anything with the company, they can't sell it, they can't raise, and they're stuck. And that's probably the one thing you want to avoid. So, the quick stuff around how you can prove GTM and a couple of strategies on what I've seen works with companies and how they get to those fast non-zombie metrics. First of all, I think for all of the successful company, your first motion is always founder-led. And I know there are a lot of startups that want to hire that first sales guy, and that's why you're raising money. But I haven't seen, I probably want to say like a single successful company last year in the AI space where the sales wouldn't be founder led. It's because you know your product best. It's because it's the easiest thing to sell for you. It's because you need to create a playbook before you give it to someone else. So I very often see, especially in the early rounds, it's all founder-led sales to prove that initial traction. And then the second part of it would be that scalable motion, that repeatable pipeline. That's typically what investors want to finance. Once you got the initial kind of sales nailed, you need to land your general process. Who does what kind of tools? You need to define the ROI. You need to define what value means for the users and understand if you're hitting that. Also, that's something investors are typically going to ask for. And then you need to prove speed. So either you figured out your inbound channel or you figure out your outbound channel, whatever that is, investors will want to see proof that the GTM is actually working. A couple of strategies that hopefully going to give you some inspiration around what you can do. So first of all, most of the AI tools today have in one or other way have a free version. Unless you have a very large B2B enterprise tool, that's super enterprise focused, you need to have a version where a user can try for free, prove value, and then pay. Whatever you take, like ChatGPT, OpenAI, 11 Labs were able to grow massively because the initial version that they had wasn't even free. It also didn't require any registration. So people can try it and then they can subscribe afterwards. There is also, even among investors, this common understanding that if you're asking people to instantly pay for your AI tool, it probably doesn't deliver enough value. Hence, you're scared to kind of open it up. So think about that. Again, doesn't probably apply to very large B2B segments, but otherwise very valid. Correct virality. A lot of AI companies we work with are managed to do it super successfully. Tally reached 500K users and 2 million ARR. We've been fully bootstrapped because they basically had this viral branded stuff on every forum created. So wherever, if you can think about those sharing loops, if you can think about those collaboration loops, if you can make sure that during that sharing collaboration, etc., there is your logo out there and people are talking about your product, then that helps massively. Build in public, and it also helps with investors a lot. Loads of founders I know that have built in public and got to where they got. If you followed Base 44, which was really hit the news. I think the company was acquired by VIX for 80 million, and it was a solo founder. So it was a huge success story. He tried all the possible channels, and the only channel that worked for him was building in public. So he accumulated that audience of builders around him. He was building on LinkedIn, he was posting on LinkedIn. And then those people watching him on LinkedIn became his first customers. And then they also became his advocates as he gave free credits to people who were building as long as they would share their success stories online. If you look at that guy and just look at his strategy as a solo founder, he didn't require any capital to execute on it. And he was able to build that business in a year from zero to an acquisition, massive acquisition by Wix. So that channel really, really works. It's tough. It's a little bit uncomfortable. You have to think about it really well in terms of who your audience is, but it really works. Another company was RB2B. They got to 5 million ARR in 13 months. Again, primarily just focused on building it in public and writing on LinkedIn. Quick strategy number 4, that's particularly for B2B segment. We've seen a company that was essentially trying to sell supply chain tools that are kind of AI powered, and nobody was responding. And then they've changed the positioning towards AI. I don't even remember. I think AI operating system for supply chain managers. And they really framed it as kind of an AI initiative, and it massively helped. So a lot of companies right now are incentivizing their personnel to adopt AI tools. If you're able to somehow find the right messaging and positioning to jump onto that boat, that helps a lot for the first pilots and adoption. Strategy number 5 is not charging per seat or not charging SaaS fee, but charging per outcomes. It becomes a very easy adoption hack. So companies that are changing to outcome-based pricing signal to the market that they're very confident their product is good. And they also drastically decrease adoption timelines and approval timelines. So it's a difficult one. It's also, I think, for me, always super challenging because your recurring revenue is very predictable versus your outcome revenue is not so much, especially if you're just starting up. But there are a lot of companies that are seeing massive value from this. So Intercom Fin, they 4x their revenue year on year with this model. I'm working with a lot of early stage companies that really struggle to get to enterprises and adoption. And once they switched to outcome-based pricing, it became much easier and they were able to get to this big curve. Waitlist referrals, I think that one, not necessarily purely for AI companies, but I've seen a lot of AI companies realizing it really well, which is you give people sign like a long wait list, you tell them they're at the end of the list, but if they invite friends, they can jump the line. For products that really resonate with consumers, that works really well. Tapping into communities, don't build a community, find one like Midjourney did with Discord. I've also seen a couple of companies tapping into like very specialized healthcare communities, for example, or finance investment bank communities, and really finding there the first users at almost zero CAC. So that works. Finding partners. Now, partner is a very old channel. It's not a hack itself, but a hack is specific motion. So I've already seen three different companies for whom a very, very successful distribution motion was private equity firms. So let's say a company automating your accounting or another company was automating insurance. They know that private equity companies own multiple different firms, multiple different businesses, and are very incentivized on profit. So they want to make sure that companies' bottom line is as high as possible. If AI helps to solve that, instead of going to one and each individual of those companies, the startups that I work with went exactly to the source, which is your private equity firms. And then those private equity firms, after seeing the initial pitch, rolled out that solution to all of their portfolio companies. I've also seen the same motion with venture capital funds. So for companies where it makes sense, for example, a solution for board reporting. You go to venture capital fund benefits because they would see better reporting from their portfolio companies, and they give you instant distribution to 10, 20, or even 100 companies. So when thinking about partners, think in those kind of creative ways around who can be a really interesting reseller partner because that helps with scale and your initial CAC. Um, Make it competitive. More than ever, engagement matters. I think the best companies in all of the AI verticals are now really turning it into either a competition or something that they can reward their users for. So suddenly I'm seeing, hiring that's being done in a form of gaming, dating that's being done like in a form of a gaming. And it drives users, it creates that stickiness, and everything that creates stickiness, customers love, investors love. So win, win, win. And then another pretty popular strategy right now with a lot of AI tools is bottom up to enterprise. This is particularly true for companies that are targeting large B2B firms, but at the same time can't get to them because the sales cycles are long, because the decision makers are saying no, because very often in B2B space, you need to be compliant. So you need to have like SOC, you need to have data privacy, security, etc. So how the new companies, AI companies are going around it, they are creating a version of the tool with the very specific use case, and they are distributing it to employees. So it can be your marketing managers, can be your sales managers, and then those start using them. And that adoption anchors them to this organization. And then essentially that's how they sign up a large B2B client. So again, something to consider. Hopefully that's helpful. I'm going to spend the remaining 8 minutes. I'm going to try to be fast just to talk quickly around how to fundraise, when to fundraise, and how many meetings do you need to secure a round. So right now, another hottest fundraising window is opening up. Investors are going to be very active up until probably early May. On average, we see that to close one round, you need 35 to 70 plus meetings. It's at some point it used to be 30, and now I think it's increasing again. The average time to close a round is 2 to 4 months, but really pre-seeds I've seen being closed as fast as 3 to 4 weeks if they're really good. Seed rounds I've seen being closed as fast as 4 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks if the company is hot. If you don't see that excitement from investors after 1 month, you're probably in for a long haul. So you need to be prepared for a long fundraise that's probably going to take 6 to 9 months. Quick playbook for getting investor attention. So ideally, you'd start engaging with VC 6 to 12 months before the fundraise. Initial conversations, keeping in touch. Investors are always going to back founders they know and they trust. And when investors are saying we invest in lines, not dots. So it's helpful to open up those conversations before you start fundraising and ask them, what do you want to see at seed round? Like, what kind of metrics do you want to see? What do you need to see on the traction side? And then work towards that. And once you're there, much easier to raise because you already have warm relationship, You have exactly the metrics that we're looking for, and it just becomes much easier for a VC to give you money. And focus on traction. So going back to that fundability, 90% of investors are actually outbound. So if you're focusing on traction, if you're building in public, most likely investors are actually going to be reaching out to you, which is very, very helpful. And again, a trick here that I keep giving, if you change your LinkedIn to like building in stealth mode, very likely you're going to be contacted by at least a couple of investors. Make sure you also self-engineer the traction FOMO. So during your race, you don't want to be chasing investor being like, hey, John, so do you want to invest now? What about now? What about now? Do you have an answer for me? You want to come back every time with a new validation point. Hey, John, didn't hear back, but actually we've just signed a massive new client and we added this to our, hey, we just got like Forbes coverage and something else. Sorry. Um, the mass of outreach. So one round close, which is minimum two term sheets, typically means 30 to 45 first meetings. Typically means 75 to 150 warmish investors in your CRM. What talking a lot, where it gets you. An average successful founder normally has around 40 meetings. An average unsuccessful founder, probably around 15. And generally, you need to plan 10 to 16 weeks for a very tight pre-seed seed sprint. So again, just keep it in mind. This is how the plan would look like. So you'd normally start figuring out warm interest early, 12 months before, 6 months before. Then 8 to 6 weeks before that fundraising sprint, you would send like a heads up note to your top priority investors, and also line up some mutual contact intros. And then sprint window, sorry, I said it here, autumn, it's supposed to be spring. You batch first meetings over intensive 3 to 5 weeks, and you aim to create simultaneous momentum. Other critical things to consider, you need to run fast. Like again, either you close in under 10 weeks or you don't. So if you don't, if there's not enough validation, go back to building. Network on repeat, like you can't escape this. People need to know that you're building. um, Keep in mind that again, creating that fear of missing out is super important. So you always need to come into every new meeting with exciting validation point. And really, that's it. I'm going to go to answering questions. Before we go, some useful resources. Always happy to connect on LinkedIn. I try to post useful stuff and stats there. We have more webinars, so please reach out if they're relevant. If you need help around the financial modeling, Google Creandum financial model template. It's the best that I've seen, and it's free, so you don't have to pay anyone. We have some slides, some design inspiration around slides that I think pretty much all got funded. So you can go to our portfolio and just check some examples of slides in terms of design. We also have like investment committee style ChatGPT plugin that mimics VC decisions. It's in beta. Happy to send you a link. Again, it's completely free, so you just upload your pitch deck and it gives you fundraising readiness score, and it gives you like missing and weak areas, and it gives you VC perspective. So, okay, would they invest or not invest? In testing. We also have Waves by Wave Up, where essentially we give assistance in pretty much anything related to fundraising, deck, financial model, investor strategy. We also help to build websites. We also help on marketing, on go-to-market. It starts from 1K. There is no minimum months commitment. Pause or cancel anytime. We're gonna take 10 new companies this quarter, have 2 spots left. So if it's something of interest or you see value, always happy to have a conversation. And that's a wrap. So thank you very much. At this stage, I'm gonna stop sharing and I'm gonna go to question. Um, okay, so we have question in Q&A and then we have the webinar chat. I'll start with the webinar chat. Okay, can you get a copy of the slides at the end of the presentation? I think you're definitely going to get a recording. If you also need a copy of the presentation, just email me and I'll send it to you. Would I review your YC application? I'm happy to have a look, but I've never been to YC, so I can't guarantee that I'm gonna provide any valuable advice there. Um, but have a look. I think I'd really recommend looking at YC founders. There are a lot of them that post that got there after like eighth time and they post on LinkedIn. So if you just check like last batch of founders and then you check, they typically give a lot of advice around YC applications. I'd really look at those deeply. Thank you for all the compliments. It's great. What are you including in the 40% COGS? So those are benchmarks. Thanks for the question, James. It's actually an excellent question. I don't know what the benchmarks include. I think you might need to check the Bessemer State of AI 2025 report. I think it's Bessemer, but try to look for State of AI 2025. I think they might explain it there. Typically, you don't include sales. So it's only the infrastructure, customer service, technical support, customer success. Some of the partnerships can sit there if you're kind of paying straight percentage of your MRR to someone. But other than that, sales and marketing is normally separately. Um, Someone is asking to share how to reach out to VC's deck. So that's not a deck. That's a recording, a webinar. And if you would like to get a copy of it, just read, reach in touch, get in touch. Sorry, it's been a long webinar. Okay. Somebody's saying we're a mission-driven nonprofit with proprietary tools, ethically sensitive data. Do you think this is basically fundable? Well, here is a question, right? Like you are basically saying we're a mission-driven nonprofit with proprietary tools and ethically sensitive data, thinking about responsible productization or revenue layers without undermining trust or values. I don't know what it means. VCs won't know what it means. So, in order for me to answer a question, do you think it's fundable? I need to have a look at this is what you actually do. We apply AI or we apply this data to do XYZ. These are the key use cases our customers do. And then do you have customers? Do they love and enjoy what you're doing? Do you have an interesting team? Do you have an interesting distribution insight? If yes, then yes, it's definitely fundable. If no, probably not. But again, I need to see more to be able to answer the question. What was the name of the financial model template? Creandum. Creandum is an awesome fund in Europe. They are amazing. They're an investor in Lovable. So check them out. If you Google Creandum financial model, you'll see the financial model pitch deck. For AI-powered review of pitch decks, yes, we're trying to train it on pitch decks that were successful, on internal pitch decks that were not part of the I don't know, Business Insider or Best Pitch Decks, etc. So most of it is pitch decks we know have been successful, but again, very, very early. I did mention a company that raised 8 million to acquire data. How are they able to show traction if they did not have data, and how did they get funding? Excellent question. That's a good catch. First of all, it was 2 years ago. As I said, 2 years ago, you would say AI and things would be very easy. Second of all, the founder had a 100 million plus exit before. So, or actually not an exit. He's built a company to 100 million plus in revenue. And then I think either he exited or IPO'd, but founders that had previous exit, they get a little bit more leeway. So they can raise without traction, unfortunately. So in this particular case, he actually raised 4 million to build an AI SDR. He failed, and then he raised 8 million to acquire a company to have data to build a better product. And then he succeeded, got the traction and raised another 20 million in Series A. So that's a story, one of the best ones. What's the best way to approach VCs? Do cold emails work? Are warm introductions more effective? If cold outreach can work, what tends to get their attention? Warm introductions are always going to be more effective, but there are plenty of companies raising without warm introduction. What gets attention? Traction. Definitely not long email. The best emails I've seen kind of go, we help banks cut their costs buy 2x. JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs on board, just booked 500,000 in revenue, raising our seed. That's it. And then people tend to reply. So I'd say that, and also really good research around the funds you're contacting and why you're contacting them kind of helps. Like, okay, you've invested there, or we're doing something similar to this company, and I've seen you talking about that. Like, just know that you're reaching out. So many companies are reaching out to absolutely irrelevant people within the fund, or they're reaching out to people who actually don't invest in that space. So do your research, and then what gets their attention is that fundability. Um, um, hardly focused on B2B AI startups. Piece of advice for B2C. Okay. Ilya, can you please Okay, I think piece of advice for B2C. I think I understand now. So in B2C AI, I mean, the rules are kind of the same. I think the traction bar used to is a little bit higher. So because it's B2C and it doesn't really require revenue to launch or get the term sheet, the even at pre-seed, investors want to see some level of validation this actually works. I also think the bar is higher in a way that for B2C companies, for example, at Series A, 5 million is a norm versus 3 million for B2B. Expectations around seed are also tend to be higher. But other than that, the modes are still the same. Basically all of the lessons are still the same. You still need to have fundability. So you still need to kind of show growth and user love. You still need to have modes. Those modes can be your distribution mode. You figured out virality. Those modes can be your data mode. Those modes can be that you've just built something people absolutely love with great UX UI. So generally, again, it's slightly different, but majority of the lessons still apply. If AI is losing momentum, what is going to be the next technology buzzword? I don't know. I don't know. It used to be we went to blockchain, we've had metaverse. AI is not losing momentum. Like, don't get me wrong. I don't think AI is going to lose momentum for a very long time. I think it's still very relevant. So we went from Gen AI, then AI copilots. That was 2024 was all AI copilots. 2025 was all about AI agents. I think 2026 still going to be AI agents and about AI infrastructure and like AI operating system and all things of that sort. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that you shouldn't use like AI at all and just forget about it. When relevant, on slides that are relevant, of course, tell people that you have an AI. Tell them you have an AI platform, AI agent. But the purpose of everything that I was trying to explain is that AI cannot be a value proposition on itself. AI is a baseline. So you need to lead with the outcomes that you're going to be delivering and the pain that you are solving rather than the fact that you are AI something. So, yeah. What do you recommend to a company that can ship products to different countries? Do I need to have different pitch decks for US and France? No, I wouldn't know why you need to have different pitch decks, but maybe I don't understand this nuance enough. So maybe you can send me a message on email and I'm happy to answer on that. Do VCs invest into different companies that could be competing with one another? No, generally they don't. So at least what I've seen, every time I was pitching, if they had even remotely something similar, they would say, hey, we need to check with this portfolio company if you guys are not competing. I think it can be different for very large VCs like A16Z that have like a lot of companies in their portfolio. But even then, I kind of think they would be looking for something more complementary rather than competitors. So a big part of this research also is know which VCs invested in your competitors. Because what they do very sneakily and very often, they would actually ask you to have a chat and they would ask you for data and they would dive in and then they would pass all the data very often to their companies. Of course, not all, but I've seen those cases happening. So, yeah, make sure you study and understand who invested where. And if you're not sure, you can always reach out to a VC saying, look, I've actually seen you invested in this company um, where they're probably a competitor of ours. But I was wondering if you know, if you still want to have a look at our pitch, given that you know a lot in this space, or if you would be open to giving us some advice. So. Um, I think that's it in terms of questions. I see two open questions around whether we can get a recording. Um, yes, you can. And if there are no other questions, I want to say thank you for joining me today. I really hope this was helpful and useful. Fundraising can be brutal, and I wish you the best of luck on this journey. Um, Make sure that it's exciting because otherwise, I think otherwise it's just very, very daunting. So, um, yeah, make sure you enjoy along the way. Thanks a lot. Have a great rest of the day.